Yeah, yeah, because I just thought like, God's creation, it means so many things, right? Like what is part of God's creation? It's so many things. But I thought instead of just talking about the standard things that Christians talk about when we're talking about like Jesus redeeming creation, and you think about bad stuff, like Jesus redeems like drug dealers and makes them into like, whatever, right? Or Jesus redeems, people that were caught up in whatever life. But I thought it would be interesting to talk about areas of life that people are kind of debate or like a little controversial or a little bit just different. You know what I mean? Like, so talking about science, I know that's an area that people disagree on. And then so it popped in my mind earlier this week about this Craig. So actually, I connected with Craig a long time ago, back when I was still doing ministry in college. And I had read his book, and I found it really interesting because he was talking about I forgot what your book was named. Here it is, Halos and Avatars. But it was just about like, a lot of people think of gamers and they just have a stereotype that's kind of negative. You know what I mean? Video games, and it's just kind of like you shouldn't play video games all the time. But I just thought his perspective in that book was really fascinating, trying to redeem that a little bit. And so I actually didn't even ask Craig. I didn't even ask him what to make the title. I just made this title myself. It's a little bit kind of playful, the idea Jesus loves video games and you should too, but I mean, that's a jumping off topic way of thinking about it. But I also thought most of us play video games on some level, and I thought it'd be a fun thing to talk about this stuff. But Craig also, I mean, let me just read his bio because he deals with more than just video games, right? So I'm gonna embarrass you a little bit by reading it out loud, if that's okay, Craig.
Go ahead, man. I'm here. I'm here.
Filmmaker and author Craig Detweiler, is that right? Is that how you spell it?
That's right.
Is passionate about good, true, and beautiful. I think that's from a verse in the Bible, right? Good, true, and beautiful. Philippians 4, right?
Yeah.
Good, beautiful, and true art and entertainment. He wrote the screenplays for The Duke, The Extreme Days, and directed the present reform documentary Remand, narrated by Angela Bassett. Any of you guys watched any of those before?
I'd be very surprised. They're too young.
I have not. I do know who Angela Bassett is. He's written about video games, Halos and Avatars, playing video games with God, technology, God, how technology shapes our spiritual and social lives, social media, selfies, searching for the image of God in a digital age, and film, deep focus, film and theology and dialogue. He's taught at a few seminaries and was honored by Variety. Is that Variety magazine?
Yes.
Oh, wow. A Variety. As 2016 Mentor of the Year. That's pretty cool. Like they're not even just thinking about Christians and
no. Just wow. Educators or whatever, yeah.
I'd love to hear about how that came to be. He loves sumo wrestling and harvesting tomatoes. Interesting. I mean, they're very different activities. In his own words, I'm so old that I saw Run DMC, Public Enemy, and the Fat Boys in concert. Which I have to confess, I don't think I know who the Fat Boys are, but
Fat Boys.
But Amy, I mentioned that to Amy, and she's like, "What? You don't know?" Like, and then she started singing about them. So probably too young. I gotta read up. But yeah, I mean, we want to hear about video games or your thoughts on them, and just any of these things. And we like to just kind of think of it as a conversation, right? When you're presenting, but also chatting with us. And also one thing I like to say, just because someone presents doesn't mean they're right. Right? I mean, just someone like I try to say that if I ever get an opportunity.
For sure.
If I preach, just because it's coming out of my mouth and I'm saying it like really strongly, I believe it, doesn't mean I'm right. So it's good for us to think of it as like a dialogue, and we're trying to explore the truth together. So yeah. So anyways, thanks for coming to share. What was yours?
Thank you, sir. I got some slides I'm going to throw on here. Let's see. View slideshow. So we got Jeremy, Marcus, Jonathan, and Rock. Glad to be here with you. It doesn't really matter what video game you're dealing with. Some of them have this very dystopian view of the future. Everything is post-apocalyptic and torn up. And then others have this kind of otherworldly perspective where you're going to different planets, different worlds, fantasy lands. And even others like Minecraft are allowing you to build your own world and create it in your own kind of imagination and image. Johan Huizenga said, every age yearns for a more beautiful world. And the deeper the desperation and depression about the present, the more intense that yearning. And so I'm wondering to what degree video games are a way of like escaping our current situation, however desperate or depressing or confusing that may be, and entering into a different space with an avatar, with kind of following somebody else into a different world. And so I guess my first question for Marcus, Jonathan, Rock, Jeremy is, what games do you play? What are some of those favorite worlds that you enter into? What spaces do you like?
All right, so there I got a list like just off the top of my dome, but
Bring it.
For lately I've been playing Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter Rise, Warzone, Fortnite, Star Wars Fallen Order. I just started playing Horizon, just beat Spider-Man Miles Morales, and then I know like a month ago I just beat God of War again, and then I was backtracking into The Last of Us 2. So I play a lot of games and I just can't stop. It's kind of like I would say it's a bad habit at this point.
Well, maybe. Well, that's some of what we'll discuss, is whether it's a bad habit or maybe that's your special gift, your special calling. I don't know.
You say Star Wars something? Star Wars?
Yeah, Star Wars Fallen Order.
Fallen
It
Order?
came out in 2019 by Respawn Entertainment, and I had to get it. It was on sale for like $20, and I knew it was pretty great.
Is that? I mean, I used to, when I was in high school, I played Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
It's not. I wouldn't say it's necessarily that's some MMORPG. I would say Star Wars Fallen Order is more of it's a solo single player game. Like think of it like almost like a Dark Souls, but just Star Wars themed in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I would just name some I played. I honestly, I'm not playing video games a lot these days, but when I hang out with this one youth, I play obviously Fortnite with him. But yeah, video games I used to play Warcraft, not World of Warcraft, Warcraft 3, which was Reign of Chaos and Frozen Throne, which were kind of real-time strategy games. It's kind of like StarCraft, but not as intense or hard. Which what's the modern game that's based off of that? There was this game called Dota, which was a certain kind of map. No, I forget what it's called. You use heroes and stuff to move around. Yeah, I played a lot. I played this one sniper game where you could, if you sniped the guy, it would follow the bullet. It would have this cutscene, and it would follow the bullet, and it would like go straight through the head.
Sniper Elite 3, or it's the Sniper Elite 1, 2, and 3. Yeah.
I think it was before the Elite. It was the older version. So you're playing way more advanced.
Next gen.
Yeah.
He's the next gen.
I mean, I used to play the sports games. And honestly, how I learned about NBA, or I learned all the players on NBA, was NBA Lives. We would just play all the NBA Lives. Duck Hunt. Amy played Duck Hunt. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think.
Marcus, how about you?
Oh, it's Marquise, but yeah.
Marquise.
Yeah. Well, I like this game called Left 4 Dead 2. It's a pretty awesome game where you can choose to leave your teammates for dead, or you can help save them. I play it often. One of the most recent games I've been playing on Oculus, the virtual thing, is Beat Saber. You gotta go with the beats and stuff like that. So that's pretty awesome. So that's pretty much the game. And another game I play is not really, it's not really much of a game, but it's like a text-based type virtual fighting type thing. So yeah, so I play that also. That's pretty much it. I don't really play out the game. I don't play games like that.
We'll get into Oculus a little bit and maybe talk about some of that. What I've found, it doesn't really matter what age you are. or what stage of life, we have always been playing, right? So maybe we traded the playground for, what's going on a video game. But again, Huizenga says, let my playing be my learning and my learning be my playing. So he would say that when you're playing, even as a kid, you're still learning, and you're learning about life, and you're learning about the rules, and you're learning how to find your way within the playground of life. And I think it's interesting, right? Like kids, they may not have a football field, but if they got a football, they're going to play. And you could be at school and a teacher brings out just a parachute, and suddenly there's a game. Or you could be kids in a war zone, in the Middle East, and if you got a ball, you're playing soccer. So kids naturally have that ability to play within this like bounded area where you say, okay, this is in, this is out, these are the rules. And once you set those rules in motion, it's kind of like anything goes. And so I guess I would say that play gives children and us a chance to practice what we're learning and to try out personas, to try out new rules, to try out new ways of being. And therefore play is a good thing. I think it is a God-given gift that was almost natural in the garden, that God set up a world and said, okay, these are the boundaries. Just make sure you don't do this, don't eat that fruit, and we're good to go. And so there was room to play. And even the best game designers now, like there's a guy named Genova Chen who creates these beautiful magical worlds in his games that he designs. And he says his goal is to create a game where people feel they're connected to each other, to show the positive side of humanity. And a lot of games have these lists of quests and places to go, items to collect, and rewards. And we ignore each other. We just kind of walk past each other. So he says in order to make players care about each other, can we remove their power and remove their tasks? So he's trying to create a beautiful world that you can enter into and treat each other not just as competition, but almost as teammates, where you're learning how to cooperate. So that's the good side of sports, and I think of games. And I've known a lot of people who actually were game creators. I had breakfast this morning with this guy who actually created all of the Lego video games. That was his company, and he taught himself how to code. He taught himself how to make these. And I know the creators of Cafe, what was it called? Club Penguin, that was bought by Disney, and they just were trying to create a game for themselves. And now there's a new generation of creators, like Derek Mans is creating games like Brothers in Arms and Aliens. There's a woman named Charisma Williams who's worked for Microsoft for a number of years, working on their Kinect formats and VR. And there's even a whole world of game developers where you could go to, We Are Game Devs, and you'll see all these different peoples and all the different jobs, right? Concept artists, technical artists, 2D artists, animators, business people, directors of development. So there's tons of jobs. So people think, oh, you're wasting time. But John Burton, who created all those Lego video games, all the time he spent playing games, he also figured out then how to make a game. And so I guess I want to challenge you to lean into that creative side of making games. Most adults, 65% of adults play video games, the majority of people. And that's male and female, almost equal, 52% male, 48% female. And the number that play who are like over 36 years of old is just as high as the number who are 18 to 35. So it's really a normal part of life. And then I think this is interesting, right? So over half of gamers are college educated, and about 80% thinks that games provide mental stimulation and they provide relaxation and stress relief. So gamers aren't bothered by their games. It's just people who don't play games who get bothered by gamers playing games. And I don't know if have you been hassled by, parents or peers or teachers who would say, oh, you should put that game down, you should stop playing? What kind of relationship do adults have to you when you were playing?
Personally, I would say yes, especially as a child. My parents they weren't really like, they're not gamers at all, so they never really understood it. But over time, like they tried to push me out of it and tried to like manage my time to it. But then to a certain point in my life, they just gave up. Like they knew this wasn't ever gonna go. I've spent too much time, effort, and money into this that like they were like, hey, I'd rather have you home playing video games than you outside in the streets. So they just said, hey, let's just give up on that idea. And I appreciate that because like now it's like video games are the reason why I'm in school. It's the reason what I do today. So it's like without it, I don't know where I'll be today without video games.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah.
How about you, Marquise?
You talking to me? I'm sorry. I was talking to my sister's friend. I'm with my family.
Yeah,
I was wondering if your family gave you hassle about playing games, or if they were cool with it.
No, they gave me a hassle about sitting too close to the TV. That's one of the hassles. Other than playing video games, nah. Like I always play video games because it kept me from like being outside and stuff like that, and like getting in trouble and stuff like that. So as long as I was in the house playing games, whatever, my mom knew I was all right. So just let me play. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, my mom, my parents definitely had that like no, thing, and it was similar to Jonathan. Like, when you keep doing it, and then they're like, whatever. But I also defended it because I remember seeing something that said that people who play video games, like, there's less violence now than there was on average than there was before there were video games or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Teenagers are actually more safe playing games. And the stats on teen violence, teen pregnancy, all that stuff has gone down during the video game era. Which you never hear that statistic ever, Jeremy, right?
Yeah.
No, because we hear about the kids who play violent things too early, and
then go become a school shooter, that kind of thing.
No, not become a school shooter, but just the dopamine or whatever, and then related to, well, it's like kids who are too young doing the rated R games.
The super violent stuff.
Yeah. Desensitizing kind of. Yeah, that's that is a different thing. I think age is a different question. But the idea that, really we've seen a lot of kids playing games who are staying out of trouble because they're playing games, which is interesting. The biggest area, when you look at the global gaming market, Asia and Pacific, by far the biggest gaming percentage, but it really is a global phenomenon, whether it's Latin America, North America, tons of folks, Africa, Middle East, Europe as well, but by far more gamers in Asia than anywhere else on the planet. And then of course it's big business, right? And you don't even realize, like Pokemon, when Pokemon Go came out, it was such a breakthrough, and this use of kind of AR technology that overlays on the real world has really changed the possibilities. And we don't even realize when we're carrying around our phones that to some degree we're using that technology all day long. And there's leaders in that field, right? Like Eden Chen, I don't know if you know Eden, but he has a company called Fisherman Labs in Pragma, and they're designing some of the best AR formats in the world, for whether that's for Transformers or for the Lakers. They're creating these overlays, right, where you're sort of putting games in our phone and on top of the real world. And then you talked about the Oculus a little bit, and of course with VR, it's just becoming more and more real. Have you guys messed with VR, and what'd you think? You like it?
Personally, I've never had the opportunity to play with VR, but seeing how it's like an infancy stage of his life, I kind of want to check it out. And I'm happy the Oculus Quest is a more affordable price. Like it's not in 500, it's $350 or a little bit cheaper, I think. So I want to definitely get into it, but I don't know. I feel personally, it's more it's a little gimmicky at the a moment. It's new, so it's it's gonna have its quirks and it's kinks in the beginning. I really want to see what it's gonna be like probably a decade from now, when you can really get absorbed into a world by itself entirely and have senses, have your five senses just be detached from the reality itself, where you can't tell the difference anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking,
Marquise, you messed with it some, right?
Say that one more time.
You messed with like some Oculus stuff with some VR.
Yeah, I love it.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I like it. When I first put it on, I was like, "Whoa, like this is awesome," you know. And it's like after a while, I'm like, "Man, I'm tired of playing this game."
Right.
Like, but it's like when I'm playing it and I take it off, it's like it just feels like I'm back to reality. It's like everything just it's not as animated, even though it's reality. It's not as animated as the game. You know, it's just the game has a lot of color, has a lot of different pixelated textures. But like once you take it off, it's like it's just regular life. You know, so it's just I mean I don't know. It's fun though. It's a fun game. Fun game.
I think about Ready Player One, that movie. Which
Yeah.
But I haven't really messed with the VR stuff much.
Yeah, it's still coming. I think they're still working it out. I think this Star Wars version of this is a really smart idea, because who doesn't want to have a something to be able to enter into, like that world. So I think it's going to get bigger and bigger, but yeah, it's still a little bit glitchy. This is a friend of mine who's created these chairs. He calls them the Positron Voyager. And it's like almost like a cinematic experience where the chair actually moves with you as you shift. And so you're sort of feeling that world move around you. So he's trying to get these kind of in movie theaters as a kind of a heightened experience. And this is another friend of mine, Christina Lee Storm, who at DreamWorks was creating like, a dragon, How to Train Your Dragon. She created like a flight version of that in a VR world. That it approximated what it would be like to fly through that movie. So we're kind of going to see, I think, more of this collapse of movie and VR and gaming, it all into kind of one big messing thing. What I'm kind of interested in is the future of gaming as an expressive form, where it can actually make you feel things. A lot of people say it makes you distant from people and makes you feel isolated from people. And this is a guy who decided to do a story of his son's battle with cancer and to turn it into a video game. So he was trying to get you more in touch with reality, and a very heavy reality, by turning it into a video game. So I don't know how you feel like when you were talking about, Marquise, I think you were talking about when you put on the Oculus, right? It feels like this hyper world. Is there a way in which gaming can help us feel more, maybe rather than less, in how we treat others or how we feel about the world? I'm not sure. What do you think? What do you think, gentlemen?
Personally, I believe yes. I do believe that it can help us connect to the real world and to emotions, because depending on if you play certain type of games, of like single player games, depending on the story, it can give you a perspective that you've never seen before, or show you something that you're like, hey. And for example, if you're playing The Last of Us 2, The Last of Us 1, spoiler alert, at the end of the game, you have to make a decision of either saving this poor girl that you've been fighting this entire game for, or let her die to save the world. That's a perspective that, what do you do? Do you take care of this girl that you've been with all your time, or help the world? It's kind of like, that's a very big choice. And sometimes you can see your desires be a little more selfish. Hey, I want to save the girl instead of save humanity. I don't know. That's a way of just to see, you could touch your heart, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. I think ethical choices are something that games can be very good at.
Helping you experiment with ethical choices and see consequences and things like that. Actually, on that note, there was this game. I forget what it was called, but I used to play it, where you actually would become, if you would make certain decisions, you would become a more dark character. Literally, you cheat someone, you trade, but you're trading not fairly or stuff. Your meter would change, and then it would change your countenance. The way you looked would start to look more like a bad guy. And then if you did good decisions, you would start to look more like a good person. I don't know. I have to look it up, but I always thought that was really fascinating.
It might be Fable. I know Fable is like that. It's a game called Fable.
Yeah, I think it was Fable. I think it might have been that. And then the way it worked was that, when you're a good guy, certain good decisions are open to you, like the kind of people that want to connect with you the kinds of, and then when you're the bad guy, you get a lot of power in certain ways, but anyways, this is really to me, that was really fascinating. I've never seen something like that otherwise before.
Yep. Well, I think it's that active choice that makes it interesting, right? So, in Pac-Man, there were like, aren't those choices? You were kind of trying to like memorize a pattern, right? And just kind of respond. Once you know the course in some cases, like with Luigi or Mario, you might just follow the race. But as the games got more sophisticated, right? And the ability to tell more sophisticated stories, then this question of like, okay, what is redemption? What does it mean to be a good guy? What does it mean to be a bad guy? What is the right thing to do? To be an assassin, is there good ways to be an assassin? Are there good choices to be made in terms of who you're killing or what you're resisting? BioShock, I think, was one of the very first games that kind of sucked you in this thing, where it was giving you these suggestions of like, would you kindly? And once you make those choices of like killing that person, you do lose a little bit of your soul. And so that question of like agency and personal choice, right? The phrase, a man chooses but a slave obeys, very interesting. So it's trying to kind of rehumanize you through that process. And maybe you've seen that. Are there games that do that better than others? You were mentioning Fable. Other ones like that?
I believe the Mass Effect series. I think that's a game that also like has a dynamic like ethical thing. Like it will choose, like depending on the outcome of things you do, could like heavily affect you later on.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, I know this game. I always wanted to play it. I think it's called Detroit Become Human, and it's about Android. I think you probably heard of it. And it's a lot of like every choice you make dictates what's going to happen next, and it's just a pretty awesome game, But I just never played it because I don't have a PS4.
Right.
I don't have that. I got a 360. So, but to touch on that note, it really doesn't affect the story of the game, but like in Left 4 Dead, like I was saying, you can choose to save your teammate or choose to not leave your teammate behind, and it doesn't really have a strong impact, but still at the end of the day, we make those choices, similar choices every day. Should I just, should I not do this or not do that? Of course, but I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that, but that game is just, it's so adrenalating because it's just like you have to make a decision with like there's no time, like how should I say, they don't give you a particular amount of time where you can just like sit at the at this question screen and think, should I choose this or choose that? Like it's instantly, you have to make a decision. Every second counts. If not, yeah, it's just so it's so adrenalating, and yeah. It's awesome.
Good.
Left 4 Dead is awesome.
Well, I think that's what I was mentioning earlier when I said let your learning be your playing and your playing be your learning. So even though you're playing, even though it's a hypothetical, even though it's an unreal world, you're still dealing with ethical choices that you may have with your friends in the neighborhood in a stress-filled situation. If you were ever called into war, all these kinds of situations that are hypothetical until you're actually in them. And then maybe you'll be drawing from these games that gave you a chance to sort of feel what that betrayal feels like, or what that like standing in solidarity with somebody feels like, which is important, and to be able to do it in a game where it counts a little bit less than the game of life, that's maybe a good way to practice,
I like the way how you said that just now, that it counts a little bit less. It still counts, because I was thinking about that. Like, people think of like the virtual world as not a real world, but I think on a certain level it is the real world, because I would just think about like people who, I remember when people would get married on World of Warcraft, they would do those, and that was a real deal. Like they actually had a real connection, and then and we all like I know Marquise plays this thing called virtual warfare, text-based way of fighting and stuff, and these real friendships like you build. Like, just because it's virtual doesn't mean it's not the real world. It's not. It is less real in terms of physically interacting with each other, but there's real consequences. And I like how you're saying it's not fully real, because then you can test out certain consequences and things that, I don't know. It's just an interesting space, I guess, thinking of it that way.
Mhm.
Changed
Um,
that way now.
what's Anna saying?
Oh, I was saying, I mean, this is how surgeons are being taught
Ah, right.
now.
Yeah. Certain scenarios, right? Where you can kind of practice on a virtual scenario, make the choices.
Yeah, like doctor, like cut open a person with the surgery, you know.
Yeah, I'd rather they practice on a video game than practice on me, for sure. Well, the power that we hold in our hands, I think, is amazing. Just the sheer numbers, right? So, I mean, you've heard about this fight between Apple and Epic Games over the stores. I mean, think about the amount of money. I mean, this is in 2018. Fortnite was making $300 million per month in revenue per month. So this is, again, you talk about real world. Those are real dollars. That is real dollars for virtual playing. And so again, anybody who's kind of like, well, that's not real, or that doesn't matter. No, that's big, big, big business with big, big fights. And even when you're playing these games that might seem silly, right? It's like, oh, Clash of Clans, that's just kind of messing around. The amount of money behind it for the company Tencent, which is a Chinese conglomerate of games. Look at all the things that they actually own a piece of. They own 100% of League of Legends, 84% of Clash Royale, 40% of Fortnite, StarCraft, they got a piece of that. So these are huge, huge businesses. And I think there's huge opportunities for young people to get into these industries and to actually work in these industries. And of course, it never occurred to us when we were growing up that you could actually be a professional video game player. That just was not a job that you could have. It was always viewed as, quote unquote, a waste of time. But now, right, you can have a very healthy career by going pro and becoming a pro player. And so you might be player unknown in a game, but then you can even turn that into a franchise or turn that into a business, your whole persona. And so playing even on Twitch, right? You get players, sponsors, followers. Here's some of the people out there. Glitch City is a Twitch live streamer playing Overwatch and Pokemon and doing music at the same time. There's a woman named Rabbit Plays Games. That's what she goes by, which is, I think, a great title if you're into RPGs. Interesting to follow her. And then there's some Latino leaders. Michael Santana is huge in League of Legends world with over 2 million followers. And then I love the guy who goes by the name Gassy Mexican, who has his own set of followers. So there's basically, I want to basically suggest to those out there who are really into games, there are careers to be had. Jonathan, what are you finding as you've been looking and thinking about this?
A lot of stuff that you showed me right now, I've talked about over the years.
Yeah.
Like pretty much all of this I've seen before, especially when it comes to like Tencent. I think people are starting to realize how powerful they are.
Yeah.
Like they are an extremely powerful company. Like the fact that they have they're 100% into like Riot, and then they also have 40% into like Epic. That's insane by itself. And they're connected to Activision, which also has Call of Duty. Like there's so many hands that they have in so many places. It's insane. They have so much amount of power. Like a lot of, like, matter of fact, the Epic Games part. Epic Games has a game engine. A game engine like this called Unreal. And Unreal is like used for pretty much a lot of games are run on like a good, like more than 50% of games are running on Unreal Engine.
Yep.
Which they license to a lot of companies.
Yep.
And seeing how they own the Epic Game Store, there's certain incentives. If you go to the store and you make games on their engines, you have to pay less to them. Like that's insane. That's they're basically feeding themselves money by just a simple incentive. And they have powers in different games that they can also help themselves. Like they're an extremely powerful company.
Yep. Well, and I want people to realize that these are, in some cases, like, so I live in Los Angeles, right? So these companies, there's jobs like right down the street, like Riot Games is just down the street here, so it's not like some theoretical thing that doesn't exist in the real world. These are real jobs. We're real people. And you could, with enough study, play, practice, hustle, there's no reason you can't be part of this world.
You're right. You are definitely right.
So I guess I want to encourage that. And for you to have a sense of that, that this isn't, when you're spending time in this arena, it's not necessarily time away from the real world. It can become your real world job and your real world calling.
Yeah, you're for surely right.
Yeah.
Easier to become a pro gamer than like a professional musician?
Do you know the statistics on that? Like which one's harder? Or
To become what, a professional gamer or
versus like a pro musician or pro?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. That is a really good question. I don't know. I think because of the ability for professionals to be followed online, you might have better odds because you can kind of cultivate your following, right? Like if you get 100,000 followers, that might be enough for you to quote unquote go pro. And once you're paid to go full time, the chance to get to 500,000 or 1 million followers then becomes easier, So with a lot of things, it's just getting up to that level where you can really devote even more time to it. And maybe it doesn't quite work that way in pro sports or music. Maybe it can work that way, where you develop a following and keep going. Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Marquise? Are there people you particularly follow, gamers you follow, or musicians?
Well, not really. And I'm not. I play games. But I'm not really much of a big gamer like that. But I do like watching. I like watching speedrun videos and stuff like that. People who like try to get the world record of certain certain things, whatever. I love watching that. I love watching people cheat or splice videos, splice runs, and they get exposed. I like watching stuff like that. But as far as like watching people games and stuff like that, I'm not really much into games like that. Like Jeremy was saying, like I do a lot of the text-based writing. That's for me. That's my game. And if I could go back a little bit, it was like these are real people. Real money, real people, right? And these are real people behind their screens, and talking, like trying to ridicule them or talking down on them. That's not what God is calling us to do. Even though it might be a game, but these are real people playing this game. So it's not really, it's not ideal to talk down on people because it's a game. And yeah, that's it. I really don't have nothing else to say. I'm not much of a gamer.
That's good.
Sorry about that.
No, that's good. I think maybe a thought that I want to leave you with in terms of my formal presentation, that you actually walk towards that, Marquise, which is this notion of the avatar, right? So we see the avatar on screen, and it's maybe an avatar in terms of a fake persona, a fake name, a projection, an idealized version of how we want to be perceived. And so sometimes we take that as less than real. And then we think we can treat people as less than human or less than decent. And so to understand the reality of who lies behind those avatars. I'd say the same thing about selfies, right? We might talk down someone who's posting a selfie and not realize, well, there's a person behind that. And why are they posting that selfie? They're looking for people to give them some affirmation, for them to feel seen. And so for them to us attack them while they're trying to be seen is to kind of denigrate that God-given beauty, that God-given wonder that is in that person. And so can we recover in this online world what it means to treat each other with dignity, both in real life and in the digital space? I want to challenge us, I guess, towards digital discipleship is probably what I would call it. Does that make sense, Jonathan? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that does make sense. I do tend to see like the lack of remorse towards people on the internet. Um, I never understood that really because we're still all human regardless.
Mm.
But I think the internet has I think the fact that you can't find someone and you can't directly have a confrontation with them, I think that's what like just gives people the I would say some weird odd like boldness towards individuals. Like because a lot of people wouldn't do that in person, but seeing how the internet's keeping you safe, it's keeping you at your house. You don't gotta see a person on the block or anything. So I guess that's what gives people that power, which is kind of sad, but hey, that's just the way it works.
Yeah. It's interesting. So the Avatar movie that came out, over 10 years ago, and there's going to be a bunch of them more. We think about Avatar a lot, but we don't actually understand the roots of the word or what it even means. And we may not understand the spiritual side of it. So the word Avatar is actually a Sanskrit word, and it's about the descent of a deity. So a deity coming down. So we might talk about the 10 avatars of Vishnu, right? Here's, if you see this image, right? Here's 10 expressions of Vishnu. And so to some degree, we could argue in a sense that Jesus was a kind of avatar, right? It was God coming down into our world. It is the descent of a deity, but it's not in a magic kind of way. Like this image kind of, it's like the magic child is like glowing. This almost feels fake, right? It doesn't feel real. It's like, what kind of barn has a glowing baby in the middle of it? But then there's other art like this. Like I love this image. Here's is this what, Mary and Joseph might look like today? On the street, it's cold, it's wet, it's raining. And Jesus coming into this world. You see that little plant, right? Just that little sign of hope that's cropping up in the sidewalk, right? Amidst a tough setting where they're like, I don't know where we're going to stay tonight. I don't know where we're going to sleep. I got to help you, I got to take care of my wife and my baby before we get into a situation here. So to realize that Jesus coming into our world isn't that far removed from that avatar experience that we bring into the game, where we drop into the game in a different kind of way. And then that communal side, which I think you've mentioned a few times, to understand that it can be a great thing to experience community and to experience friendship with people who we may have never even met in real life, but we text with them or we play games with them. This is kind of like a fake version of that ideal family. Like, hey, we're just all having a happy time playing a game. But I think there are real friendships to be had. And sometimes we can get caught up. We can maybe feel alone connected with our technology. But maybe I'd ask you, to what degree do you feel like God can be a part of your gaming world, or real friendships and community can be part of your gaming practices and the people you're texting and playing with on any given day?
I would say for sure that I think God has helped with like connections, because like I've been gaming for a really long time, and I have met people on video games like for over a decade and been playing with them now, and we have never met in person, but we have still played games for like a very long time together, and they live all across the world, and I think that's really amazing. Like I would never met this person without the video game, without having any type of like, I would never met them at all. That's pretty much it. Like without this game, without this special thing, we would never be friends. And that's a friendship that has grown over time and just keeps growing. I think that's amazing. Like that's something that could never happen 20 years ago.
Yeah. So it could potentially extend your community, right?
Exactly,
so you have more
yes.
friendships,
Mm-hmm.
more relationships around the world. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
All right. I also wanted to say what Jonathan was saying about, making friends on the internet. And I heard some people say, I think I read a few quotes about it, like the people you meet on the internet are one of the most closest friends that people have, in life, because you might know someone in person, but y'all don't really know, y'all know each other based off this subconscious thing about appearance. You know what I'm saying? Like we hang with each other because we look the same, we act the same, we talk the same, blah blah blah. But over the internet, it's something totally different. It's not based off appearance. It's not based off of how I sound. It's not based off any of those things. It's based off of something else. You know, like John was saying, like like gaming. You know, we game together. We like the same game. We play the same boards, whatever, and we just talk from there. And for me personally, I know a lot of people, like Jonathan was saying. I know a lot of people who I do the role play fighting thing for years. I still know them, like 10 years, 15 years, and I still know these people. And it's just amazing how strong friendships can be just over the internet, it's just over the internet. And yeah, it's some of the strongest friendships that I have is through quote unquote through gaming, through gaming. So it's just pretty interesting about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and I think for me and the whole series that Jeremy's introducing here is an effort to dignify and understand God's reach throughout the whole world. And so for people to say like, well, if it happened on the internet, then it's not real, it to me is almost to limit God, and it's almost to limit God in us. And to understand if the Spirit's in me, that Spirit of God in me extends through the internet into those relationships that I have with people, whether I'm physically with them or not. And so I guess I want to dignify exactly what you're saying, and as far as your experience, whether it's Marquise or Jonathan. I don't know about you, Jeremy, Anna, but I want you to see that God's lordship extends into the digital universe, and it doesn't stop when we get into the computer and when we start playing games.
Can I ask
Is that resonating with you, Jeremy?
Yeah, can I ask a question about that? I mean, like, it seems to me very often areas that we as Christians, I mean, to be fair, right? You wouldn't be presenting all this stuff about video games and presenting the potential redemptive and positive picture about the possibilities if it didn't have a lot of negative stereotypes and that kind of stuff,
Yes.
It just seems to me that oftentimes we go through this stuff in history where it's like there's this area of culture that Christians view as negative or bad, and perhaps rightly, or the reputation is justly earned, right? I'm just thinking about, there's been times when like dancing, I know there's like some schools where dancing is just not allowed, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because a lot of people with dancing, it just kind of becomes like really, I don't know, just hypersexualized, whatever, right? Or like, yeah, or just leading to negative things, or like, yeah, I just think about a lot of areas of life. I don't know. I mean, it's not all coming to my mind, but just like where it's understandable to think of it as like, don't touch that, stay away from that. But then, like what you're saying, like if we don't try to touch it or try to enter in, like we still have to be careful and wise, right? We still have to not just kind of turn our brains off.
Correct.
And like if Jonathan is like discerning that maybe he's going overboard, then maybe that is the Spirit of Jesus saying like, hey, yo, like, you got to cultivate friendships and stuff and real, whatever, right? I mean, think about the rest of your life. But on the other hand, you can swing too far and just like throw everything away. And if Jesus wants us to go into that space and be a redemptive presence, then maybe we're leaving behind a certain calling. I don't know. I'm just exploring some of these thoughts, like what you're saying.
Yep. Yeah. That's good. What do you think, Jonathan?
Repeat the question again.
Well, I think Jeremy, I think what you're suggesting is right. Like, so in this image, there's a version in which when you can get too tied up in your games, and you can get caught up, separated from the real world, right? Where you're cocooned too much, you're tied up, holed up in your room, right? All of us for the last year have dealt with that problem of just like, can I even go outside? Can I even be face to face with somebody? So you got to check yourself. But that doesn't mean that you can't continue to venture out there, right? Ezra Koenig said, some people say video games rot your brain, but I think they work different muscles that maybe you don't normally use, right? So it's like a different knowledge that you can develop, and different relationships that you can develop online.
Yeah, I see where Jeremy's coming from. I think to the picture you had previously, how the guy was wrapped up in all these cords. I do think, as I stated earlier when I first walked in, yeah, I think it was a bad habit, but to like put it in the like perspective that I think when I first started playing video games as a child, yeah, it probably got to a little addictive state, but I was like probably doing it a little too much. But then again, I think, and that took a very big hiatus over a few years because like I was like becoming a teenager and like trying to experience everything under the sun. So I think to a certain point, I do see where it's coming from, but then I also see like it has blossomed too many great things in my life that is like I can never look at it as like this has been a bad experience. Like as I said previously, like this is why I'm in school. Like I'm a computer science major, and the reason why I even got into technology at all was because of video games. That cultivated a love for technology out of just from a video game, and now that's formed into a lot of other things. So it's like it was a seed that grew that might have looked a little crazy in the beginning, but I took time, watered it, and let it, and now it's a big oak tree, and now it's done so many great things for my life. And this is an example of one. Look what I'm doing today, like, and look at the Zoom call. So I say things in moderation, but sometimes you gotta look at it and be like, right now it might look a little crazy, but you never know what could happen in the future.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I guess what I want to do is to at least affirm your sense of calling in that, right? That in that time when you were like, I don't know, is this a bad thing? And am I wasting my time? I want to say, no, you were probably being more yourself or the best part of yourself. And you had to kind of press through that, not to become the most obsessive part of yourself, but the best, most sustainable part of yourself. And that includes this love that God gave you for computers and programming and technology and science. That's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And I'd say the same thing to the person who's fiddling around with music and spending a lot of time maybe trying to create beats and spending time on the computer messing with all that. That's a great thing. That could be your calling. And so don't be afraid of it, but to potentially see that as leaning into who God made you to be, even though it doesn't maybe look traditional in certain ways.
And I think that's a good point to point out that it might not be traditional. I've noticed with just most religions, tradition is a big thing, and venturing away from tradition can be looked as a very negative thing. But as time has shown, like sometimes you cannot do things the same way. Sometimes you must try something different. Yeah. I get the mindset if it's not broke, don't fix it. But sometimes you gotta try something else.
Right.
Right. The line between.
But if I
oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Amy.
I was just thinking about the line between a
No, go ahead.
The line between a hobby and a job, like when something.
Yes.
A hobby can be really enjoyable, but once it's a job, sometimes it depends. Sometimes it might not be as enjoyable.
Yeah, for some people, like making beats, you like doing it, but once you got to make a living off of it, you're like, I don't want to do it on that level.
That's good.
Well,
what were you gonna say, Marquise?
No, yeah, I wanted to touch on a few things. That kind of like, because I go through the same thing. I've been doing, like I said, I've been doing the tech-based thing for about 15 years, and that kind of like that consumed most of my life, but in a good way though, because I can spell now. I'm a better speller. Before I wasn't spell. I used to shorthand stuff, and I can comprehend better, whatever. So I just learned a lot of stuff through through the role play fighting thing. But I also wanted to say something about how, like you guys talk about how just because it's not traditional, people look down on something, but at the same time, those same people compare themselves to someone else, and they say, well, we're not doing it, you shouldn't be doing it either. But it's like everybody has their own calling, not put that out there. But I also wanted to say something about where Paul talks about he does says that everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. But also he says when you do things, do everything for the glory of God, and I mean everything, everything. So yeah, you could be playing video games for fun, but I think the point I'm trying to say is if you just feel like you just want to just like play video games, for the hell of it, there's something I guess for an excessive period of time where you just like don't want to do other things. I think that's where the line should be drawn. Of course, according, especially to God's standard. If you live into the standard of the world, who cares? Like, 'cause you can justify anything. So, well, I want to play games because I like playing games, and that's what I want to do. You can justify anything, but you can't justify yourself and God's standard because God is the justifier. He's the just and justifier. So with that being said, sometimes we don't realize how things can become an addiction. I guess sometimes we probably often justify it and say, well, maybe this is my fault, like Jonathan, not to throw shade on Jonathan's his idea of his walk with gaming. But sometimes we can justify and say, well, this is what that's what I want to do. It's just a game, and God's going to bring me out of it, or God's going to mold this to the way, like Joseph is saying, and the Bible says, what you guys meant for evil, God meant for good. We can say that all day about anything, but that doesn't mean that what we're doing is bring glory to God, and the only way to bring glory to God through those things is to, like we're saying, like to use a particular mindset that's going to help you expand the kingdom. So we're making certain choices. So you know what? Even though I don't want to lose, I'm going to make this choice because I want my mind to be molded like the mind of Christ. And also, we talk to people in a game or whatever. We don't try to put them down. Oh, you're a scrub. You're new. We might trash talk for fun. There's a difference between trash talk for fun and trying to bring somebody down. If we want to use that tongue to edify the person. Hey, maybe next time, man, we get them next, like, come on, and encourage them. So we got to use this mindset, the mind of Christ, when we playing games. If not, then it's like, like I said, we playing games for the hell of it. And it's like, that's not really doing too much because, me personally, it's not really doing too much because it's just not, So, yeah, I forgot where I was going with that. But like, yeah.
I get that. I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
Amy, I think some of what you were saying, hold on, is a little bit like this. Is this difference between work and play, and hobby and calling? So I think Brene Brown says it pretty well here. She says, if you want to live a wholehearted life, you have to become intentional about cultivating rest and play. And so that's where it's kind of like, so if playing video games becomes your life, then that can kind of consume you, right? So you still have to figure out what is play or what is rest within your life, and to let go of exhaustion as a status symbol, even though you could exhaust yourself playing video games, right? Or trying to be productive, like winning the game. And so I think that's maybe the tension that you were describing a little bit. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the kind of part of my story, like wanting to be a musician, and then my parents seeing that I probably wouldn't have been able to sustain myself, or like know that I'm not like perfectionist enough to advise me against doing that, and to keep it as a hobby / play / rest outlet instead of a career outlet.
That's good. That's good. Well, I had enough slides. Maybe I'll close with these three, which is just to say that with games, it's easy to press a reset button, and it's harder with life. Yeah. But if anything is true of what the spiritual life is about, it is that sense of reset, right? That ability to restart, to be born again, is the core element of what it means to follow God and follow Jesus. That possibility of reset, whether that's I've been too obsessed with games, or I've been too focused on my career and not on my community, or whatever that is, it gets us offset. That the possibility of being reset is good, and that Jesus would show up in our life, whether that's physically, whether that's virtually. I believe that Jesus takes many different forms, and that he will meet us wherever we are, at whatever stage of life where we may need him to be fully present. And so anyway, I thank Jeremy for the chance to be with you all tonight. What a great community.
Can I ask you about that? Like just the whole meeting people where they're at. Like I get a sense. You mean you're in the LA area, Hollywood. I guess you said the video game world is probably a lot of stuff there too. I just think media, right? I mean movies, tech, media, right? All that kind of stuff. And it seems like you've befriended people. I wonder, like in terms of meeting people where they're at, have you seen anything like in terms of trends or like watching people in their own like because you don't, it sounds like you have a very non-judgmental posture about entering, like walking with people in those places, in that world, in those worlds that they live in. Media, like it's easy to look at Hollywood as a negative and godless place kind of stuff, right? And I'm sure you probably have seen a lot of the underbelly of those kind of things. But like I'm just curious, like you as a follower of Christ, the spirit in you being present with people, like what's that like? I mean, what's that like? Even in this presentation, you mentioned like 3 or 4 people that are video game designers, like, right. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know exactly what I'm asking, but just kind of like your own witness among these people,
Yeah, well, I would say creative people to some degree are often creative because they're processing pain from their own life. And that's one way to do it, is creating alternative worlds, creating different endings, turning pain into a song, turning heartbreak, right, into a pop 40 hit where you get the girl or it all works out in the end. And so I think that's why I became creative. I needed to use my imagination to process a lot of the pain of my own life. And so it's easy for me to come alongside other creative people who are doing that and to see that their striving or their ambition, their desire to be seen, their desire to be heard may take kind of some weird and disturbed forms, but it's rooted in just a desire to be loved, a desire to be known, and to have a sense of you're not crazy and you're not alone. And so I think having experienced that in my own life, it's easy to bring that into I would say the marketplace of ideas and creativity that I've walked in over the last 30 years. Yeah. And I think that's why I like to encourage, whether that's Marquise or Jonathan or you and Amy, it's sort of like whoever's younger as you're trying to sharpen your calling and figure out, okay, who am I supposed to be? It's okay to lean into those things that maybe people don't quite understand, and maybe you don't even understand. Like, why do games speak to me so much? You don't have to necessarily answer that question for me to say, well, lean into that and figure that out and look at that as maybe God with you, not God against you, and not as something that's separate from your calling in Christ, but it could be the fulfillment of your calling in Christ.
Have you ever gotten like hard pushback? I mean, I imagine some people will give you some hard pushback, especially if because once you try to enter into some worlds, it's like there really are gray areas, right? I mean, I mean, with Hollywood, there's some really dark stuff, right? I mean, there's the whole porn industry. Isn't it all located? Isn't it like the central part of the porn?
Yeah, it's in San Fernando Valley. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this is where that ethical dilemma, I mean, I think Marquise was really good about talking about Paul and the gift of discernment, the need for discernment. Yeah, you have to kind of decide for yourself where your lines are. So I mean, I have friends who direct horror movies, and like really scary, dark, bloody, R-rated horror movies as Christians. So they would say, well, that was a part of their growing up that in a sense doesn't scare them, that they look at that as normal's maybe not the right word, but they look at it as a way of exploring the dark side of ourselves. And in that sense, it doesn't scare them. They look at that as an honest place, sort of, to enter into the questionable sides of life, the ethical dilemmas that we talked about. So they're making horror movies for God, like Exorcism of Emily Rose, which is about like the reality of the devil and scary things, but also says if there's a devil, then maybe there's also a God. And if there's a God, maybe that God is actually stronger than the devil. I'm not going to probably write that movie, but I'm glad that they wrote that movie. And I'm glad that movie exists. And so I'm not going to judge them and say, how dare you? I'm going to say, that's really interesting. You know, what is it about your life that made you not scared of the dark in that way? When maybe a lot of Christians are scared of the dark. And maybe you're braver than they are. So they may judge you and say you're the weaker brother, when in fact you might be the stronger brother. And it's the weaker brother who is judging you and condemning you for being involved in that area. And so they've twisted Paul around and got it a little bit backwards, maybe.
That's a really, I'm going to be thinking about that insight, you know, the weaker brother, you know, people perceive you as a weaker brother, maybe you're the stronger brother. And maybe if I perceive someone else as the weaker brother, maybe they're like making myself question. Because I will be honest, with the horror thing, there's been in the past, I think part of it is like when you feel the eerie feeling in you, and then you interpret that as that's demonic, that's negative. Like I've had that in the past. And maybe because my own conscience couldn't deal with it. But one of my mentors, you know, Sherry, she's a older, she's a 70-year-old, and much more mature in the faith, you know, very strong in the faith. But she loves horror movies. You know, she's like a connoisseur, you know, and it's hard for me to figure some of that out, but like, I guess, yeah, that's really helpful thought for me. I mean, it's not a genre I gravitate towards.
Right. Well, I know that like there's a new Conjuring movie coming out, and that series was started by two twin brothers who are my neighbors here. They literally live like 2 blocks down, deeply committed Christians. And so they're telling a story about like sort of like real life exorcism based on real cases. And they're trying to say like, no, God can win that. And it's scary. It's really scary, and it's really real, and it's really dangerous, but you don't need to be afraid of it. We're going to expose you to it in a way that you'll be less afraid and maybe better equipped to enter into that. And so the Conjuring series, whether that's, you know, the Annabelle movies or whatever, there's a deep spiritual side to that series that I can say as a Christian, I support what they're doing, even though I might say that movie's not for me.
That's insane that you know the creators of Conjuring, because that's me and my girlfriend's favorite horror movies. Like we love the Conjuring. Yeah, that's just crazy.
Look them up, the Hayes brothers.
That's crazy.
Chad Hayes, Carrie Hayes. That's who wrote them.
You know, we about to connect up with them. Awesome. Yeah. I kind of want to hear how they process that. Maybe in the future we can have a way to connect with them. But
yeah,
I wonder. One last question for me. I mean, you guys can talk, but when you think about some of the darkness in the video game world that you've seen, or like some of that stuff, like are there, or like, you know, your friends that are there, like it doesn't just have to be the content of what they're making, but like I'm sure they face some things like they're challenged by. Like I even just think about like when you're in the business world in general, like when you're light next to darkness, you know, or like, you know, Jesus' parable is the wheat and the tares, you know, and they grow up together. Like I feel like every day is like a little bit of a tension. You're walking this very tight, this narrow path, that's what Jesus said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very narrow. Like, so do you see that? Do you see that among your friends that are in that?
Oh yeah, I mean, and look, these are the questions that we talk about when we get together. One of my friends, a Christian in the video gaming world, was kind of like pushed by the studio to put this pentagram ceremony in a video game, and he was like, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to show kids like this is cool and this is like a thing and you should try this at home. He's like, I'm not going to do it. And he kind of lost his job over it. I don't think he was happy about that. I don't think he wanted to take that stand, but that's the stand he had to take. So it wasn't easy, but it's also a long life, right? And you have to make a lot of different choices, a lot of different stands. Sometimes they'll be ethical, sometimes they'll be political, sometimes they'll be sexual, emotional. Every day you got to make those choices, and that's actually something that I like about games at their best, is they've given you a chance to think about how jacked up some of the choices that you're given might be. And so maybe you remember in that game feeling lousy about that choice you made. And then when it confronts you in real life, you're like, you know what? I don't want to make the wrong choice. I want to make the right choice here, even though it might be costly. Like you were talking about in Fable, right? Where it's like, I want my countenance to glow a little more positively, at the end of the game of life, if you will.
I want to say, oh, excuse me. And I say that I like a lot of like horror films and, psychological horror and blood and gore. Like I guess people kind of like look at me like, I don't know, what a face like, how can you like those things, because God is against such things, and I don't know, I just like those things. I like, the blood, I like stuff like that. And when you were saying, it was pretty I guess pretty encouraging, that, those people may be afraid of those things. That's why they look at you like, oh man, why you watching stuff? Because they're really afraid of it, But I also wanted to say what came to mind was, Jesus and Paul. Jesus said, I know y'all familiar, said it's not what goes into a person comes out of a person, And if we watch those things, just get like a rush, like, yo, I want to do that one day. Like that's the wrong reason why to watch it. But if you're just watching it because you're intrigued and interested in how like the body is, broken apart, that's for me. Like it's amazing how people can visualize how the body can be like split to pieces, or how people think, whatever. That's intriguing to me, So it don't necessarily make me want to do it. It's just like, wow, that's interesting. It's really nice, What's another verse that Paul says? Paul's, I think it's in might be in Colossians. I forgot which one it was, but he says that he's like, so why do you still say do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, when all of these things will perish? All these things will perish and it be wasted away. But it also he's also why people do those things to like show some type of piety and show that look at me, I can abstain from certain things, but it doesn't do anything to the heart. It doesn't eliminate the deceitful behaviors of the heart. It just makes you look like you're a pious person, So people are like, oh, I don't want to buy this stuff, but maybe deep down inside they really like that. They just don't want to show that they like it because they might be judged, or whatever, But I always say, like, I love horror movies. I like blood and guts, and I'm not ashamed to say that I do, So praise the Lord.
Agreed. I understand. I love gory video games. Mortal Kombat's one of my favorites. It is what it is.
Right. It is what it is.
So I had a student one time for a theology class I was teaching. He wanted to do his final paper on the Saw franchise. Huh. He wanted to talk about the biblical and ethical choices in the Saw franchise. And I was just like, man, I don't know. But you know what? If you can write that paper, I'll read that paper. and it was a good paper. And that guy is now a full-time PhD professor of journalism and new media in Southern California. So it's all possible and potentially permissible. I wasn't going to write that paper, but I'll read it. I'll read it.
This has been an interesting Monday for sure.
Well, the one insight I'm really going to take with me is like just thinking about the Holy Spirit lives in us. I forget how you said it, but if we're always thinking about, and it's kind of connected to what Marquise is saying, what if we have something viewed of like something out there is going to contaminate me?
Yes.
Versus Jesus in me, and then yes, he like just trusting God to guide me in when I'm making these decisions. Like if there is a sense that I should not touch something, then he will give me that insight, but otherwise we should follow the Spirit and celebrate certain things, even if others around us don't necessarily fully understand yet, kind of thing, because our unique calling could be a blessing to other people in the future, even if they can't understand it yet at this moment.
For sure. My friend who makes horror movies, he's like, I'm making horror movies for me when I was 15. And I was trying to find God in a horror movie about the devil. And so that's who he's making movies for, and that's his very unique calling. Not mine, but that's his. And just like Jonathan, clearly, Jonathan, you got a unique calling. Clearly, Marquise, you got a unique calling. Amy, I'm glad you're healing people and playing music, and I think you're all blessed to have Jeremy here as a leader convener. So,
yeah. Hey, can I ask? Would you be open to if we ever? I mean, it sounds like you're connected to people out there. Your friends probably don't want people being like, "Hey, share all that information." But if anybody is open to being contacted, or even just contacting you, if we ever are interested in this kind of stuff in the future, is that
sure? Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely contact me, and I think it would have been easier to get people over the last year when nobody was working. At this point, everybody's just like, I got to work. I got to go make a movie. So they're all just scrambling. They're going to Vancouver and North Carolina and going wherever they can to make movies right now. So, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna make it a goal sometime in the future to try to get your neighbors to come share. Really, man, I struggle with that one, but I maybe even just for my own personal spiritual growth. Yeah.
In the meantime, I'll see if I can find a good video of them talking about it on the web, because I think it probably exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this has been rich. I mean, I don't want to take too much of your time. It's really been a great. I mean, can I have maybe us pray for you real quick? Like,
please.
Maybe actually, Jonathan, can I know that you're probably the most avid gamer among us. Is it okay if I invite you to share? It doesn't have to be long, just a quick word, and I can close us. Maybe.
Jeremy, I'm not the greatest at this.
It's up to you. You don't have to, but if you want to, it's up to you.
I don't know. I don't got anything on top of my dome.
All right, I'll close with some prayer and with a blessing, just to thank you about it.
Yeah, I do appreciate you being here. Like, I think this has been a great experience. Something that I never thought would happen on a random Monday. Trust me, like this has been definitely much appreciated.
All right. I'm glad you had a good Monday. I'm glad anytime we can redeem a Monday, that's a good thing.
Definitely.
Amen. Let me pray for you. Lord Jesus, thank you for this conversation. When we get a sense that you have made us for something and we just come alive in it, and you made us good at it, and you help us to in some ways connect with Jesus, connect with other people better through it. It's a gift, Lord. We receive it as your grace, I think about every good and perfect gift comes from God, and you don't make crap. And whether it's the creative things that we've created as human beings, or whether it's us as human beings that are trying to discover who we are through our interactions on the internet or those are all good things. And I just pray that, well, thank you for this conversation that Craig helped us to have. I just pray that you bless him too in his interactions with people in Hollywood, in what is it, in like the video game world, and in some of these different worlds that he's trying to navigate, and does take wisdom. And I pray that you would give him wisdom. I know that you offer that to us by your Spirit as long as we listen to you. I pray for us too, because we need that kind of wisdom. Who knows what's next in our callings, but we know that you're guiding us, and so we just ask for that continued guidance. Bless us as we seek to pursue those gifts, and use them to their fullest potential. So, in Jesus' name, we pray these things. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thanks, gents.